This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it's time for Avoid the Maze. You are special. Today, my guest is from podmatch.com, and Davina, thank you for being a part of that great community. Because if it weren't for Podmatch, I probably would not have met Davina. I wouldn't have seen what a good guest she would be helping others. You know, life is a maze. We're never going to get out of it. And we have to accept the fact that there are times we're going to get stuck in a corner and we're going to feel like we're the only one because everybody else, especially out on social media, their life is perfect, absolutely perfect. Davina and I were talking before we got started today about some of my deficits. And one of those big deficits is just not enough sleep. But I see so many of my colleagues talking about the fact that they're working 10, 12, 14 hours a day. And I used to, but now I'm working 8 hours a day. And I feel like, are they getting ahead of me? But life isn't a race. So give us a little bit of background, Davina, how you got to be the person you are today, and how do you help others, try to focus on their best virtues.
Yeah, and thank you for having me, Karen. It's a pleasure. I started in this work as many people who go into mental health, either wanting to avoid looking at their own stuff or trying to figure out their own stuff. So I was always that mediator in my family, really did not like when people entered into conflict, was always trying to make it better. So I fast forward to my master's degree in forensic and counseling psychology. And I'm learning a lot about diagnoses and I'm working prison system. And I see that I wonder, right, how many of those who are incarcerated, how many of those who have challenges in life in general, whether they actually have diagnoses or whether they are just lacking coping skills, whether we are just emotionally illiterate because we aren't taught these things growing up. So that was kind of one of my aha moments during my master's program and was just like, oh man, therapy is not what I thought it was going to be. And I wanted something more skills based. I got into anger management in an attempt to fix my husband. In all honesty, I tried to infiltrate from within. And then I learned very quickly into that certification that I'm also the problem, that I also contribute to it. I have my own stuff. It wasn't so easy to just blame him. And we really started doing this work little by little. Once we became parents, the work that we had done just wasn't enough. And we got rocked. Our marriage got rocked, our entire sense of self, our identity. We struggled and it overwhelmed our ability to cope. And it was at a point where I was nearly losing my marriage. My kids were having a tough time with it, of course. They were seeing a version of myself and my husband that are not ideal. And I sat up late at night thinking about how my kids would forgive me in the morning anything and how much I was taking advantage of that. And that was kind of my moment of like, no, we're done. Something needs to change. And so we really dove into the work that I do now, which is emotional regulation, more of that emotional fluency and staying mindful throughout our day. And now I continue that work in helping others.
One of the interesting things you talked about was you were running out of cope. And I have a very good friend who's also one of my coaches. And she uses that a lot. She'll say, like, if I call her to say, hey, let's go meet for coffee. If she's not ready to do it for whatever, she'll say, I'm out of cope. And I know what that means. It means she needs her downtime. And a couple of times she has said to me, I shouldn't have even answered the phone because I'm out of cope.
Mm.
And once I started thinking about that in the back of my head, I realized that I could lower my stress levels because instead of arguing with someone, namely my husband as well, it was like, this isn't getting anywhere. It's escalating. I'm feeling terrible. He's feeling terrible. Nothing gets resolved.
Mm.
You're right. We aren't taught how to do this because even as little kids, we get mad at each other and I'm never going to play with you again. I'm going to take my toys and go home. Um, so is there a time and place to start teaching this type of regulation? Because I think we live in a happier world.
Yes, I mean, we absolutely would. And I am no child development expert. I do work with parents, and I'm not working in a parenting program. I didn't
Sure.
develop parenting programs. I develop programs for parents. And I don't think that there's any best time except for just right now, right? There's plenty of times where I look back and my kids are still young. I have two boys, they're 5 and 8. They're still quite young. And there's versions of us that will go back and say, wow, I should have started this earlier, and kind of just harp on ourselves and punish ourselves for it. And that will just contribute to the problem. We'll be more reactive. We won't engage with them in the way that we want to. And so, as soon as you realize that you are capable of this and that everyone would benefit from it, that's just where we start. So, where we do want to start is just with staying mindful throughout the day. And I know that that word is very foofy and woo woo. A lot of people don't like it. Really, it just means starting your day with intention and staying in your body throughout your day, listening to what your body's telling you. And that way, when your kid is giving you a hard time, or when your kid is rather having a hard time, you don't absorb that within yourself. And then we're both kind of arguing like kids.
It's interesting because I have two sons. They're 15 years apart. So
Mm,
they are totally, I mean, not all kids are the same anyways, but these two are totally different. Um, and I had different issues with both of them.
mm,
One is a product of divorce, my oldest one. And I didn't know how to handle that. I was still a young mother at the time. And I took out a lot of my anger, not directly on him, but he saw it and he
sure.
absorbed it. Um, my youngest um, is on the autism spectrum. And although very high functioning, while he was growing up, we were told by doctors and therapists, this is what you have to do for him.
Mm,
And I put all my soul into it. Then I was angry because
yeah.
I looked at him. He's no different than the little boy next door, but you're telling me this is what I have to do.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize it, but when I started coaching, my parenting, and even though they were grown, totally changed. Instead of telling them what to do or how to do it, or even delve into some of their things, it would be like, sit back, just listen. You don't
Mhm.
have to tell them what to do. And it's like, what a difference. I mean, there's no arguments, and I hear so many other parents will say as their kids get older, we argue more now. Well, you know
Mm,
what? We probably didn't listen when they were kids because I surely didn't.
mhm.
Now's the time for me to sit back and listen and not be judgmental.
Mm.
So I agree with you. There's no specific time to make the change. Now is the time for each of us.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point about living our lives and parenting and really just navigating the maze through other people's direction. And we see that happening with young parents often, right? It's okay, well, is this a sleep regression? What do I do? Where's this other parenting book? What can I do here? And we stop being able to trust our own intuition. And when we are leading our life like that and kind of keeping up with the Joneses and feeling like I have to do things this way versus what just feels more natural to me, that's where I think we lose our compass. And then we end up doing that to our kids, and they stop being able to, or maybe they never learn how to listen to what their intuition is telling them. And given some of them are feral and they wouldn't last a day if we let them just run wild, it's also within reason, right? My husband and I try to live by one, natural consequences. If it's cold out and you don't want to wear a jacket, okay, go outside. It's cold, and then you're going to want a jacket.
Yeah.
And also within the do dangerous things safely kind of mentality. And they're boys. They're very rough and tumble, very different personalities entirely. And yeah, we're constantly kind of melding ourselves and trying to evolve throughout that because we are raising them very differently because they are very different temperament and all of that. And I did hear something that rang true for me is that they say that you grow up with your firstborn and you raise your second.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I didn't grow up with my firstborn. I still was, even when he moved to live with his dad when he was 11 years old, I still felt like this new mom. Now, I was a
Yeah.
new mom to my youngest, but I felt like I don't know what to do. You know, um, did I do it wrong with him? And that was a lot of grief that I carried with me. And I find
Sure.
that a lot of my clients that I coach will say the same thing.
Mm.
My daughter is 22 years old now, and she doesn't really want to talk to me because she remembers the day, that I didn't let her buy that prom dress, and, that ruined her life. And I try to tell people, let your child feel what they're feeling,
Yeah.
acknowledge it. Okay. I didn't for a long time. But when my youngest, one day he just said to me, Mom, if I don't start making mistakes on my own, I'm never going to truly be an adult. And it was like, oh my God, you are right. And so I don't know what his first big mistake was, but when he made a mistake, I remember him coming to me and going, that was a learning experience.
Wow.
And it was like, what was? And then he went back and told me what he had done wrong. And he said, but I figured it out. And I keep hearing that from him more and more. He'll call me. He now lives quite a distance away, and he'll make that same comment. And I'll say to parents, as parents, we try to tell our kids what to do because we know that touching that hot stove is going to burn our hand. And so we start with that. Don't touch that. And then we see them want to jump down a whole flight of steps because they think they're Superman. And we go, oh, don't do that because you're going to crack your head open. We can protect them only so far. Because if they really want to jump down those steps, they're going to wait till we're not around and they're going to jump down it anyways.
Yeah.
So we have to coach them through those things. So, how did your practice actually get started? I mean, this isn't what you really thought you were going to do when you went to college.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely isn't. It was a bit of a slow burn. I founded this in 2019. I graduated with my master's in 2015. So throughout there was getting married and having my kids and one of them. And then it started out with court-ordered anger management. I knew I still wanted a forensic side, but I didn't want to do traditional therapy, and anger management allows for that. So I started doing court-ordered, employee recommended, those types of things. And then that kind of very quickly transitioned into a lot of men on the tail end of an ultimatum. And then they wanted to bring their partner in because then it was causing marital problems. And then it very slowly evolved into more couples, family-owned businesses. Because really, everything that I'm doing is anger management. But we don't really know what anger management is until we're in it and we learn it. And it has a very poor reputation. And so that's really everything I do is with the tenets of anger management, just disguised as something that isn't, because it's really just life and emotion management. And so that's where I kind of got to today.
And most of us don't want to admit that we have that angry side. We're going to blame it on
Yeah.
somebody else. I know in my first marriage, and I did this for many years after we even divorced, in my mind, it was his fault that I got angry, that I cried, that, I would just lay down on the floor as if he was like punishing me. And
Yeah.
I remember when I met my current husband, I laid down this law. You can't say these things, you can't do these things. Then I realized, wait a second, I never had this conversation with my first husband.
Mm.
I didn't tell him what was triggering me. He may have sort of seen it, but he wasn't ready to recognize it, and neither was I.
Hmm.
And I look back and I realized I was the one who was really getting angry. I was taking things like, oh, what are we having for dinner? To be like, oh my God, like you know, who do you
You
think?
take so much advantage. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think most of us just don't recognize where that's all coming from. I finally, after almost 20 years out of that marriage, was sitting down somewhere talking to a friend, and I said, oh my God, those were things that maybe happened to me when I was 5 years old. And my
Yeah.
mother yelled at me because I didn't bring something to the table at dinner. And so now he's asking what's for dinner. And I'm thinking about that time that I got yelled at. So
Yeah.
when you're doing anger management, are you delving into the past or are you starting from this point forward?
It's a really good question. So, with anger management, what we want to do is focus more so on patterns building. And if they know where these patterns came from, that's of course helpful. And from time to time, we will kind of reference the past, but therapy is really where people should go back and live there, right? Like that's their residence for therapy. And so this is more so about, okay, tell me historically what it's like, what it looks like when you get angry, what kinds of situations trigger you. We go through an entire checklist of everything possible that we know of that could spark something, and we pull themes from those types of experiences to figure out exactly what are the underlying things. It's not just that this guy cut you off in traffic. It's what was that beneath it? Did it make you feel small? Did it put your safety at risk? Did it inconvenience you? Did it startle you and that put you into some sort of fight or flight? And we really just start delving into these patterns. So once we identify them, we can start really leading with that mindfulness and maybe not preventing them, but go in expecting them. And then we learn new tools and strategies, coping mechanisms, breathing techniques, these types of things that help us move through them and not necessarily shove them down or react to them automatically. And it's a really good point that you mentioned about reactions is that there are a few different types of reactivity, and very many of them, especially when they happen so quickly, we really are like that part of our brain is just living in the past. A lot of the time, we're trying to right an injustice
Right.
from before. Yeah.
So I don't know if you can say this with any data, but
hmm
are men more triggered to anger than women? Or are we equally, just as angry?
Yeah. I mean, there are some differences within testosterone and estrogen and those types of things. Some of our wiring is just different. Men are more conditioned for physical aggression in order to protect and defend and or conquer, right? So there are those parts. When it comes to just feeling anger, we're all built pretty much the same. It's really just what we do with it. Again, testosterone is a really big deal. It's one of the first things we ask is whether they're taking any sort of hormonal supplements, especially testosterone. And so there is that. But what we do know for sure is that men tend to be physical, like outside expressors, and women tend to be internal. And so it's very similar to my husband. We used to argue. He would punch things, throw things, storm out, slam doors, the whole deal, very expressive externally. And I thought he had the anger problem. But then I would punish emotionally. I would shove it down. I would pull away. I would withhold intimacy. I would find other ways to instill guilt upon him, thinking that that was empathy, thinking that that was just begging for his compassion and care. But I've really come to learn that that was my internalized form of anger. It's really about how we're raised and what kinds of narratives we have in the world that men, for the most part, are allowed to be angry, if not encouraged. And if they show anything but anger or happiness, then they're soft. They're not manly enough. They're not masculine enough. And women, if we show anger, we are rude. I'm not sure if we
Yeah,
use foul language
that's
here. So
okay.
we have those types of things. And then, but we are allowed to feel sadness and happiness. So there's a lot of these societal expectations, and especially for men. Men suffer in silence. They're the highest rate of suicide. Men are the top cause of death for men and women. And that's typically because they are told to shove down everything and only allow for it to be expressed in those types of ways. So that's usually what we see within the men is so much of their life in a hyper control, really white knuckling their experiences until it eventually volcanoes.
And it's interesting because as you described your husband and yourself, I was
Hmm.
more like your husband. Okay. Um, Growing up, I'm the youngest of three with two older brothers. And so I
Mm-hmm.
basically kept it all in.
Yeah.
Now that I was away from home with somebody who was supposed to love me, I became combative. If he didn't say or do what I needed, um, I got angry.
Yeah.
And I hate to tell our listeners, but I'm finding out that is not uncommon. You've held it in so long. Now you feel like you're in this safe place.
Hmm.
I can let it out. And my problem was that I was too vocal and my emotions ran so high that some of the things I said were just really not the way I felt.
Yeah.
Um, and thank God for a good therapist when I went through my divorce because I got to understand that why did you tell him that, you wanted to die? Did you really want to die? No. But
Mhm.
I wanted him to feel sorry for me. And
Yeah.
that's why I use those words. And she would say to me, number one, you can't use those words. Okay. Let's find another verbiage to use, something that's not going to destroy you or the relationship.
Right.
So when you're working, especially with individuals who either are incarcerated or have been incarcerated, um, are they really willing to open up and make the changes they need?
I mean, some, right? When they're there as a result of not their choice, there tends to be a natural sense of resistance in the beginning. Some stay resistant and kind of just get the check marks that they need, the progress notes to the court, and then they complete. Um, and more often than not, they are. They really are likely not happy to be there, likely ex went through different anger management programs in the past and were made to believe that they were the villain. And my approach is very, very different. One of my major things is de-villainizing anger, allowing for us to feel anger without it progressing into aggression. So, and I'm also a one-to-one provider at the time, so I wasn't running groups, and so it's very personal. And eventually, pretty quickly, usually a session or two, they begin to kind of put their guard down and are very open to it. I think what the reason why the stigma is so poor contributes to why people view it so poorly and why they're so resistant to it and there's so much emphasis on them being the problem, but the aggression is just the problematic solution. Even in your case, right? That wasn't actually what it was. The only problem is that because the solution is so large, it steals the spotlight and then your original complaint goes unheard.
Right.
And then you're the one apologizing
Yep.
when you had
Exactly.
the original complaint, right? Like that would drive anybody crazy, constantly being in that position. I definitely did that with my husband. When he would bring me a valid complaint, but bring it in a way that was not very valid, I also wasn't good at being able to hold space enough for him, give him enough credit and benefit of the doubt to help him determine what that was, or at least listen long enough without getting defensive, without asking him to change his tone or sit down or, not be so quite large. And then he would get loud and all of these things cause damage and then have to come back tail between his legs and I would demand accountability, right? But there wasn't that part afterward that would say, okay, thank you for acknowledging that. And what was it originally? Like what was underneath that? Where do you need me to be different? Where do you need modifications? And that's what we do now. But at the time, I just couldn't see it.
Right. Well, one of
Yeah.
the things that I've learned and I've gotten very good at is when I feel myself getting overly anxious over something, or I feel like it's going to develop into something worse,
Hmm.
I just separate myself. Not to the point that I get in the car and I drive off necessarily, but I'll go into another room, or I'll just say, we need to table this for now.
Yeah.
Um, and the difference that I'm seeing between myself and my husband is because I'm not overreacting.
Mhm.
He's a different personality. It's like, okay, this must be over because she's going to go take a break. And
Uh-huh.
so when I do come back, I'm ready to have that conversation with him. And he listens, because I'm not accusing him. Oftentimes I'll say, I'm sorry, I couldn't talk at that point because this was bothering me, or I was focused on something else. And at times I think to myself, boy, I wish I had been doing that for the last 40 years of our marriage. But
Mhm.
it's better to be doing it now than never. And I'm hoping
Absolutely.
that's what our listeners are hearing, whether it's for themselves or, somebody else that they know who needs to go through anger management. And anger management should not be a deficit. And I don't know how to change that other than to keep preaching that we all get angry. We
Mhm.
need to learn how to control it.
Yeah, I think we naturally villainize things that we don't understand. And that's kind of what it is. Anger comes across really, really big and intimidating, and sometimes it can mimic childlike behaviors. And then we may lose respect for them or feel disrespected. And so it really is that one like to go in timeout, right? We don't really address what's deeper than that. And of course, there's a lot of internalized shame. So there are these resistance points. But yeah, I mean, anywhere that you're willing to start is where we want to go. A lot of the time when we start doing this kind of work, and myself included, we can have this notion of, well, I'm gonna have to change everything. Like it's just such a big task. And then also, if I change something, it means that it needed to be changed. And what do I do with that realization within me? And again, we just want to start with really small things. Small things often, keep promises to yourself. Recognize, to your point, recognize when you just wake up grumpy. I wake up breathing fire some days. And it really, the more I allow for myself to just exist within it, let the people around me know, like, hey, I woke up breathing fire, just like I'm working on not being reactive today, just as a heads up. So my husband knows not to bring me anything like super big. We're working together as a team. But if I wake up grumpy and I villainize the fact that I woke up grumpy and I shove that down, each inconvenience, no matter how minor, will build up into something that eventually explodes. So yeah, just starting with that. And to your point, again, it is just starting now. I've worked with clients well into their 60s, 70s who then say like, well, it's too late for me to change and what's the point? And I should have done this 40 years ago and that kind of thing. And I'm like, okay, well, you're 72. You didn't wait until you're 73. This is amazing. We have the opportunity to make these modifications and repair. May I ask you a question?
Sure.
Have you shared all of this with your ex-husband? Is he still with us?
Oh, yes, I have. And I've shared it with my oldest son.
Mm,
In fact, I took a coaching of a grief coaching
mm,
because I wanted to get over the grief of what happened in our divorce.
yeah.
And I had never really shed it, but I found while I was going through it, I was forgiving him in the coaching session.
Mm,
And each week I go, this is amazing. I I don't think I ever really hated him or disliked him. I
mm,
used those words because I was hurting at the time. But
yeah.
when I look back at it, and I've said to him, it was the best thing we could have done for each other. We are both remarried. We're both remarried for 41 plus years. We extended our families. And it's like we really weren't meant for each other except for that short period of time.
Mm,
And I hope other people who may be in that situation can look at the fact that there's not one person who's in the wrong. Um,
yeah.
And I felt guilty as a parent having a child who, at 11 years old, went and moved in with his dad. And I held that anger against his dad. And then I realized there were a lot of reasons why he went. Not that he didn't love us and wanted to stay in my family, but he had cousins back with his dad. He had other family members, and we didn't. And so as he got older and we could talk about these things, it opened up my mind. And as you said, being mindful, listen to what's going on. And I'm glad that I didn't go to my grave, or he didn't go to his grave, without me understanding this.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I coach now, because I want people to understand that anger is something we're all going to go through, but you don't have to hold on to it. And my second husband used to say to me in the beginning, stop holding on. And I would look at him and go, well, but it hurts. And he'd say, go find something to stop the hurt.
Mm.
And it took me over 30 years to do that.
Wow.
He stuck with me, so I'm very grateful. So
Yeah.
how can our listeners find you, maybe, jump on board with you if they need counseling?
Yeah. So anywhere, especially on socials, my handle is a steady space, not study. It's not, we're not learning, we're not studying for school. We're not trying to get a degree. It's a steady space. You come in, you find your balance, and you go back out into the world.
Got
So
it.
that's my handle. That's my website, all of it. I do have the Parental Shift program launching June 5. It is a 30-day beta. So by 4th of July, you will be more regulated. It'll be kind of your own independence from that reactivity as well. Nothing crazy. I'm not a guru. I'm not gonna pretend that this is gonna heal you entirely. This is really just dipping our toe into understanding the neurochemistry where our reactions come from and working through them.
I love it. Well, thank you for joining me early this morning. Davina is from the West Coast, and we're recording on the East Coast. So I do appreciate your early bird. Have
My
a great
pleasure.
day. Thank
You too.
you. Bye-bye
Thank
now.
you.